Imagine standing in a courtroom where love, betrayal, and the search for truth collide in a storm of legal drama. In this story, we take you inside one of the most emotionally charged infidelity trials ever recorded. A case where a marriage unraveled publicly and every secret was dragged into the light. This is not just about cheating. This is about power, deception, and the cost of losing trust. This is the story of the infidelity trial, when love turned into a legal war. Before we dive in, if you find stories like this fascinating, don't forget to subscribe to the Verdict Diaries. We bring you new courtroom dramas, real-life legal sagas, and stories that challenge everything you thought you knew about justice and relationships every single day. It all started with what seemed to be a picture-perfect couple. Andrew and Vanessa Bennett lived in a quiet, upscale neighborhood just outside of Chicago. He was a rising executive in a financial firm, known for his strategic mind and calm demeanor. She was a popular interior designer with a thriving client base and a magnetic personality that everyone adored. To the outside world, they were the dream couple, successful, attractive, and deeply in love. But behind closed doors, the reality was far more complicated. Vanessa had grown suspicious over the last year. Andrew was traveling more frequently, his phone was always on silent, and he had grown increasingly distant. The emotional connection between them had faded into polite conversations and shared responsibilities. Late-night calls, unexplained absences, and cryptic messages began to stack up like pieces in a dark puzzle. When Vanessa confronted him one night, he denied everything. He claimed it was stress from work, that he was working late to secure a promotion, that she was imagining things. But the feeling in her gut told her something wasn't right. So, she hired a private investigator. The PI followed Andrew for 3 weeks. The findings were undeniable. Dinners with a woman named Madison Hart, weekends out of town under the pretense of business trips, and even hotel receipts. Madison wasn't just a casual fling. She was a junior analyst at Andrew's firm, 14 years younger, and fully involved in a romantic relationship with him. Vanessa's world fell apart. What hurt most wasn't just the betrayal, it was the humiliation. The realization that their marriage had become a facade, that everything they had built was resting on lies. She didn't confront Andrew right away. Instead, she went to a lawyer. And that's where this story turns from betrayal into battle. Vanessa filed for divorce and initiated a lawsuit for emotional damages, citing breach of marital duty, reputational harm, and financial deceit. Andrew, caught off guard and in damage control mode, lawyered up immediately. The legal war had begun. The case quickly became high profile, not just because of the nature of the accusations, but because Vanessa's legal team decided to file a claim that hadn't been widely tested in court. They were seeking punitive damages based on intentional infliction of emotional distress. The lawsuit alleged that Andrew had deliberately deceived Vanessa and used shared assets to fund his affair, violating fiduciary duty as a spouse. This wasn't just a divorce. This was legal warfare over morality, finances, and reputation. The courtroom was packed during the first hearing. Media outlets picked up the story, dubbing it the infidelity trial. Social media lit up with commentary. Everyone had an opinion. Some felt Vanessa was overreacting. Others believed she was setting a precedent for accountability in marriage. Andrew's defense team tried to shift the narrative. They painted Vanessa as controlling, overly sensitive, and emotionally unstable. They argued that the marriage had been deteriorating for years and that the affair, while regrettable, was not grounds for punitive damages. Andrew himself took the stand, claiming he felt emotionally neglected and that he had made a mistake of passion, not intention. But Vanessa's team was relentless. They presented not just evidence of the affair, but financial documents showing company trips that doubled as romantic getaways, gifts purchased with joint accounts, and even manipulation of work schedules to accommodate secret meetings. The turning point came when Madison Hart was subpoenaed. She had initially refused to comment, but under oath, her testimony was devastating. She admitted to the affair, described how Andrew had promised her a future together, and most critically, the courtroom air was thick with tension as the trial shifted from explosive accusations to cold, hard facts. As promised in the opening round, Vanessa's legal team had only begun their warpath. Now came the phase where they meticulously laid out the paper trail, evidence that turned the emotional betrayal into a calculated series of deceptions. They began with credit card statements. Thousands spent on luxury getaways, jewelry, and gifts, all linked back to Madison. Then came business expense reports showing fraudulent entries that Vanessa's attorney claimed were used to launder the affair's costs. Not just dinners and hotels, flights, spa treatments, even an apartment lease paid for using marital funds. Andrew's defense scrambled to explain it away. His attorney, a sharp but visibly cornered man named Joel Winters, argued the expenses were miscategorized and had no clear indication of personal misuse. But even the judge couldn't hide his skepticism. He asked bluntly, "If these trips were strictly for business, why is your client's name on the hotel registry with someone who isn't his wife?" A silence followed that question, a silence heavier than any testimony. Then came the bombshell email. Vanessa's team produced a leaked email chain between Andrew and a trusted friend. In it, Andrew confided he was done with the marriage, that he was just staying long enough to cleanly transfer assets, and that he couldn't risk an ugly scene. It wasn't just betrayal, it was premeditation. Vanessa sat in silence as the words were read aloud, her face composed, but her hands trembling. In that moment, the jury wasn't just seeing a man who had strayed. They were seeing a man who had plotted his exit while smiling through family dinners and birthday parties. But the court wasn't finished with Andrew. To establish emotional distress, Vanessa's legal team brought in a psychologist. She testified that Vanessa had been diagnosed with severe anxiety, sleep disorder, and situational depression, all stemming from prolonged gaslighting and manipulation during the marriage. She doubted her instincts for over a year, the psychologist said. He led her to believe she was paranoid, insecure, and irrational, when in fact, she was correct. The court was beginning to see this not just as a broken marriage, but a power dynamic gone toxic. Next came the friends and family testimonies. Vanessa's sister recalled late-night phone calls when Vanessa would sob on the line, questioning her sanity, begging for clarity. A neighbor described seeing Andrew sneak Madison into the house when Vanessa was away on design jobs. Her own children, aged 14 and 10, were set to testify, but Vanessa, in a powerful act, refused to allow it. "I won't have them relive this in public," she told her attorney. That single decision earned Vanessa massive respect, even from the media that had hounded her. Then it was Andrew's turn. His legal team decided to put him on the stand, a risky move. Dressed in a dark, tailored suit, he entered the witness box with a carefully rehearsed calm. He admitted to the affair, but denied all financial wrongdoing. "I was unhappy. I felt trapped," he said, "but I never meant to hurt anyone." The cross-examination dismantled that image. Vanessa's lawyer read out texts, emails, financial logs. If you didn't mean to hurt anyone, why did you lie about filing for divorce while sleeping in the same bed as your wife? One question hit. Andrew had no real answer. And then came the worst of it. The court had obtained Madison's private diary through subpoena. In it, she wrote, "Andrew said he was close to breaking free. He told me she'd lose everything, that the lawyers would eat her alive. He promised we'd move into the lake house together by fall." The courtroom was silent again. Andrew's character had been shredded, and Vanessa's case, both legal and moral, had never been stronger. As part 2 ends, the stakes couldn't be higher. The jury's perception had shifted. What started as a case of infidelity had become a case of manipulation, control, and a fight for justice. The courtroom sat in stunned silence as the pages from Madison's diary were slowly placed into evidence. The words weren't just intimate, they were strategic. Every entry suggested a man preparing for a clean break, both emotionally and financially, at the expense of the woman he once vowed to love. The defense team knew the case was slipping through their fingers. Vanessa's lead attorney, Elise Camden, seized the opportunity with her next move, a subpoenaed video recording. It was from the security footage at a luxury boutique where Andrew was seen purchasing a bracelet, not for his wife, but for Madison, using a joint account credit card. The date? Just 2 days after Vanessa's birthday. This wasn't carelessness. This was cruelty. In the eyes of the jury, Andrew was no longer a flawed husband. He had become something else entirely, calculated, selfish, and unapologetic. The media outside the courthouse reflected this shift. Headlines now read, "Infidelity trial turns into financial scandal," and "From romance to revenge, husband's strategy exposed." Andrew's defense attorney, clearly panicked, began a damage control strategy. They shifted the narrative once again, this time focusing on Andrew's childhood trauma, his struggles with emotional regulation, and his supposed dependency on validation from women. A clinical psychologist was brought in to testify that Andrew's upbringing had caused a deep-rooted fear of confrontation, leading him to lie rather than face emotional discomfort. But the jury didn't seem moved, and when cross-examination revealed Andrew had told no one, not even his therapist, about this trauma until the trial began, the expert's credibility began to crumble. The following day, Vanessa's legal team went in for the final blow: the financial forensic report. This was the centerpiece of the case, an intricate breakdown of Andrew's financial manipulation over 2 years. It included charts, dates, and withdrawals from multiple accounts. It showed the slow, quiet siphoning of funds into an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, a move Andrew denied under oath just a week prior. The jury gasped. The judge ordered a 10-minute recess to allow the evidence to be reviewed. In that time, Andrew sat at the defense table, face buried in his hands. Madison had stopped showing up to court entirely, and Vanessa, she remained composed, flanked by her sister and legal team, her silence more powerful than any outburst. Once court resumed, Elise Camden delivered what would become one of the most quoted closing arguments of the year. "This is not a story of a man who made a mistake," she said, pacing the room. "This is a story of a man who built a second life in secret, who drained trust from his marriage like money from a joint account, who planned an escape not just from his wife, but from responsibility. And now he sits here, asking you for sympathy. I ask you, what is the price of betrayal?" Silence fell. Not a murmur, not a cough. Even the reporters forgot to type. And then it was Andrew's turn to face the jury one last time. He stood. No suit jacket, just a wrinkled dress shirt. His voice cracked as he began, "I've made terrible mistakes. I was afraid to be honest. I didn't know how to tell the truth without destroying everything. But I never meant to cause pain. I never wanted to hurt Vanessa." But it was too late for sincerity. Vanessa's eyes didn't leave him once. She didn't flinch. Her hands, folded in her lap, remained still. The judge recessed for jury deliberation. The courthouse buzzed with anticipation. Outside, a crowd of reporters, protesters, and curious onlookers had gathered. Hashtags like #Justice for Vanessa and #Betrayal on Trial were trending across social media. Inside the jury room, 12 individuals held Andrew's future, and possibly the legal precedent for emotional damages in infidelity cases, in their hands. 2 hours passed, then 3, then 5. By hour 6, a note was sent to the judge. The jury had reached a verdict. As everyone returned to their seats, the atmosphere was electric. Camera crews positioned, reporters poised, the room collectively held its breath. The bailiff entered with the envelope. The judge opened it, scanned the verdict, and read aloud. In the matter of Vanessa Bennett vs. Andrew Bennett, the jury finds the defendant liable for intentional infliction of emotional distress, misuse of marital funds, and fraudulent concealment of financial assets. Vanessa's hand flew to her mouth. Her sister embraced her. Across the courtroom, Andrew sat frozen, unable to look up. But there was more. The jury awarded Vanessa $3.2 million in compensatory damages and an additional $1.5 million in punitive damages. The ruling sent shockwaves through the courtroom and soon through the legal community. The judge banged his gavel, court was adjourned, but outside those walls, the story was just beginning. "We'll take you." The courtroom had emptied, but the world outside was just beginning to react. News outlets exploded with coverage of the verdict. Headlines ranged from $4.7 million verdict in explosive divorce trial to justice for Vanessa sets new legal precedent in infidelity cases. Cable networks aired reenactments, legal analysts debated the emotional damages ruling, and social media couldn't stop talking. Vanessa became more than a name. She became a symbol, not of revenge, but of strength. In the days following the verdict, she released a single statement. "I didn't come here to win. I came here to heal. The truth is, no amount of money will undo the pain, but it gives closure, and with closure comes peace." That statement went viral. Women across the country, and even abroad, began to share their own stories of betrayal and manipulation. Hashtags like "Vanessa was right" and "emotional abuse matters" were trending for weeks. Advocacy groups picked up the case, and law firms began re-evaluating how they handled emotional distress claims in divorce proceedings. But what happened to Andrew? He filed for appeal, of course. His legal team scrambled to portray the ruling as emotionally driven and legally unsound. But most experts predicted the appeal would fail. The evidence had been too strong, the jury's reasoning too clear. Madison, the other woman at the center of the chaos, disappeared from public view. According to reports, she moved to another city and changed jobs. Her name was now tied to one of the most high-profile legal betrayals in recent memory, something not easily outrun. Meanwhile, Vanessa took time away from the spotlight. She left social media, stopped doing interviews, and focused on rebuilding her life. Quietly, she launched a support initiative for women going through toxic relationships. It wasn't about celebrity or status. It was about helping others walk through the fire just as she had. But the legal world had not moved on. Law schools began using Bennett v. Bennett as a case study in both family law and emotional torts. Judges across the country referenced it in rulings where emotional distress was previously overlooked. And for many, this trial marked a cultural turning point, one that recognized emotional abuse not just as a personal tragedy, but as a legal offense. For Vanessa, justice hadn't just been served, it had been rewritten. In one final twist, months after the trial, Vanessa was approached by a major publishing house. They wanted her to write a memoir. She declined at first, until she realized that sharing her story could help others understand they weren't alone. The book, titled The Truth Between Us, became a bestseller. And Andrew? He faded into the background. No more TV interviews, no podcast appearances, no redemption arc. For once, the narrative didn't shift to forgive or forget. It stayed focused on accountability. And maybe that was the real victory. As the credits on this real-life courtroom drama begin to roll, we're reminded of something important. Justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about validation, about truth, about finally being heard after years of silence. So what do we learn from the infidelity trial? That betrayal isn't just about broken vows. It's about power, manipulation, and the lengths some people will go to hide their truths. But it's also about the strength it takes to stand up, speak out, and fight for your own peace. If this story moved you, if you believe more people should hear what really happens behind courtroom doors, then take a second to subscribe to the Verdict Diaries. We bring you true legal stories that explore the messy, emotional, and unforgettable realities of modern relationships. There's always more to uncover, more to learn, and more truth waiting to be revealed. Thank you for watching.